co-created the astronomy picture of the day with NASA.
Robert Nemiroff, welcome to the program.
Thanks for having me.
Now, Doctor, you work in a lot of fields, or a lot of areas, but one thing that you do is study apparent and actual superluminal events where something either appears to exceed the speed of light or does so under special circumstances, such as the speed of light slowing down in a medium like water. Give us an overview of that.
Yeah, so it's a famous phrase that nothing can go faster than light, but that's actually not true. In my view, what's very clear from special relativity is that you can't take something with mass and accelerate it through the speed of light. I take the view that nothing with mass can actually move faster than light. We have no evidence for anything that has mass moving faster than light. We have no evidence that happens. And I believe that. But that doesn't mean that nothing can do that, because if you take your laser pointer and you flick it across the wall or the moon, that spot, which has no mass, is unlimited in speed, as are shadows. You can make a shadow. There are reflections that can go really fast. Also, there's scientists who slow down light in certain media. So in water, light is about a third as fast as it is in vacuum. But there are physical experiments that slow down light so it's effectively stopped. So if you walk by that experiment, you're walking faster than light. So who cares? Is this semantics? Well, there's actually some really cool optical effects that occur. Let's see. One of my scientific quests right now is trying to find one of these effects out in the universe, and that is an effect called relativistic image doubling, where you see something because something is going faster than the speed of light, either in a medium because it came from vacuum at the vacuum speed of light and went into water, which is a third speed of light less, and so it's still remembering its vacuum speed, so it's going faster speed of light in water. So that was going to create something called Cherenkov radiation, which is one way to see it. So you can look at that, and if you have a particle that's coming right toward you in water that came from vacuum or just the atmosphere, and it's moving at the speed of light in vacuum, but it's faster speed of light in water, then it's going to be faster than the light it emits through water. So if it hits you, you're going to be hit by the particle first, and only later are you going to be hit by the light that particle created, Cherenkov light. So what you would see then is you would feel the particle, boom, what was that? But then you would see something move away from you. It move away. So that is one of the strange optical effects of the superluminal, that things can appear to move away from you instead of moving toward you. So let's say now that you had something that comes into the water, a particle that comes into the water, and it is moving slower than the speed of light in water. It happens, things move slowly all the time. As this came toward you, if it was emitting light, you would see it start from far away and move toward you. So now let's do something in the middle. Let's say your particle comes into the water, moving faster than the speed of light in water, but it slows down, and in the water becomes slower than the speed of light in water. What do you see? What you see is relativistic image doubling. When it went from superluminal to subluminal, you suddenly see two images of this object. One comes toward you, one goes away. And so that is the essence of something called relativistic image doubling. And I think that it's possible to see things like that out in the universe, or it's been seen once in the lab. But I think it's not only a novelty, I think it can tell us about stuff. So that's one of my scientific quests, trying to find places where this might happen in the universe, and actually, hopefully with the modern technology, actually discover it out there.
What might we learn from it?
You know, whenever you see in relativistic image doubling, you know that the speed of the object moving toward you dropped from superluminal to subluminal. So you have a piece of information about the speed of things that you didn't have before. If you see something just moving through the universe, you don't really know its speed because you don't really know its distance usually. And you don't know what angle it's moving at. But if you see relativistic image doubling, you know that its speed toward you right then was c. And that gives you a piece of information that enables you to decode things. So also in the lab, it can actually help you see three-dimensionally, and it takes a while to explain why things like superluminal fronts and relativistic image doubling allow you to go from a static photograph where you just see flatness and you don't know depth. If you were to have the timing information and you could see where the image doubling occurred there, you could actually tell three-dimensional information, and you can get a three-dimensional photograph. So it could have a lot of information, a lot of use. But let me break down another very simple experiment that everyone's done, but no one really appreciated, very few people appreciated what happened. So picture this. You go into a dark room, completely dark. The walls are dark. In the room, somewhere in the room, is a light bulb. It's off, so the room's dark. You turn on the light bulb, and instantly it goes on. After a second or so, less than a second, all the room walls are completely illuminated. So all the room walls went from dark to illuminated. Now, that means that at some point, there was a line on the wall that between light and dark that moved, where the lightness moved across the walls. It's easy to show that that line, always moves faster than light. It contains no mass, but that is, every time you see light move across the surface, every time you turn on a light or a variability that goes across room lights or anything in the room, the way it goes across that surface is faster than light. So with modern technology, if you could resolve that, you could see how fast these fronts are moving, and you can get three-dimensional information. So that's one of the goals of this. Superluminosity happens all around us all the time, but our eyes are just too slow to see it. Our brains take about 1/10 of a second to integrate what our eyes see. But with modern technology, with super fast cameras, these things can actually be picked up. So that's so my adventures into superluminal. We're also trying to find things experiments that have superluminality built into them that aren't really appreciated. For instance, cosmic ray air showers are like this. So a cosmic ray hits the top of the atmosphere, and those particles in a pancake come down toward the surface. That pancake moves down to the surface, typically faster than the speed of light in air. Therefore, if you could see this with your eyes, and not with just the particle detectors on the ground, if you could see that, what you would see is a pair of the images of the shower. One goes down and one goes up. And I think there's the technology to actually see that.
One thing about the speed of light is calling it the speed of light is an oversimplification, because really what it is, at least in my understanding, the point at which you would need infinite energy to move mass. But what imposes the speed limit on a massless particle like a photon?
Okay, so a photon is, so the maximum speed limit is called speed of light, but really it's fastest that we know things can go, things that can carry momentum, things that can transfer information. The fastest that can go is, quote, speed of light, which really means maximum speed limit. Now, it could be that light has tiny, tiny little bit of mass, but it's going so close to the maximum speed limit that we see it as, quote, speed of light. And so that maximum speed limit is also shared by neutrinos and muons and other fundamental particles that zip around. So light itself might not be necessarily important for the maximum speed limit. So the phrase speed of light might emphasize the role of light too much. So Einstein and Lorentz Fitzgerald all discovered that there was this invariant speed limit, that the fastest anything can pass you by is this speed, which is identified as c. And the simplest thing that we have that we can see that does that seems to travel at speed c always, is light. So we call it speed of light. I think I might have gotten a little bit off the track. So if you could remind me of the point of your question, I can address it.
You addressed it in that way. There's also the question of time, and that time dilates and slows down the faster you go, and the closer you get to that speed of light, more time dilates. How does a photon?
Okay, so that's a really good question. So we don't know. So one of the reasons actually I'm pretty good at this right now is because I'm trying to write a book faster than light. And it's about how shadows can move faster than light, but we can't. So I address some of this in my trying to write this book. So some of this is pretty special. Okay, so there's a photon experience time. So we don't know, we're not photons, but as you go faster, as you get closer and closer to the speed of light, Lorentz contraction makes the universe smaller and smaller. So you can go to the nearby stars in a short amount of time if you could go faster. It's really an engineering problem as to how to get to that speed, as opposed to a physics problem that is not possible. So for photons, they're right up near the maximum speed limit. At the maximum speed limit, there would be infinite, the universe would be infinitely compressed. But then we get into this battle of infinity. What is infinitely compressed? What is no passage? That's why I prefer the photons, because photons actually have a tiny
This area is clear, Commander.
and they do experience time passing a little bit. Because when you get into these zeros, zero time passing, infinitely contracted, then you just get into strange things that might not really be physically true. All we know is that as you go faster and faster, there's more and more time dilation, that the effect of massive objects appears to increase without limit. But we don't really know at the limit. We don't really know what happens at the exact maximum speed.
Now, exceeding the speed of light, there's this idea of the tachyon, where you have a particle that can't ever slow down to the speed of light. Would time move backwards for such a particle should it exist? And as I understand, we have no idea if they exist, but they're not prohibited by general relativity, right?
So unfortunately, I don't like tachyons. I don't really study them. I think that's, I've read things about them that the more energy they have, the slower they get. The things I study that move faster than light are illumination fronts across the room, things that generate Cherenkov light, laser pointers, things that create relativistic image doubling that we could see all around us. So I'm not a big believer in tachyons. It could be that there are massive things or things that have imaginary mass that do move faster than light, but as I said, we just don't have evidence of that. And so it makes for fun speculation, but it's not speculation that I really like to do. I like to be in the more here and now. As crazy as it seems, but I like to study things moving faster than light. I actually am pretty conventional. The things I study emit Cherenkov radiation or just laser spots. These are conventional things. They're illumination fronts on shadows you see in the Hubble Variable Nebula and things like that. These are well-established phenomena where you can actually see things go faster than light. I just don't know much about tachyons, and I'm not all that interested because I don't see way up to tachyon.
Now, regarding Cherenkov radiation, this is actually something anyone can see by searching a video of a nuclear reactor. Enormous pulse of just blue light. What actually produces? What is the mechanism of the production of Cherenkov radiation?
Ooh, yes, okay. So I don't actually see. So when a charged particle moves through a medium that has inherent charges in it, like water, even though water isn't charged, it has protons and electrons. So when a charged particle moves through that, it creates in its wake coherently be careful because it's not used coherently, a way that many of the charges behind it act in a very specific way. So the particle that's moving is itself not creating the Cherenkov radiation. The Cherenkov radiation is created by the medium it's moving through, and actually very slightly behind the particle. And if you had a medium that had nothing in it, or had absolutely no way of differentiating charges, then it would not produce Cherenkov radiation. So it is created by motion. Whenever you move a charge, you create motion radiation. Whenever you move a mass, you create gravitational radiation. So when something moves faster than light, when a charged particle moves faster than light, it creates light from behind it that is then known as a Cherenkov. Sorry, it's a little bit redundant, but there we go.
Now, one thing I have to ask is just the things that can move faster. I have this idea floating out there of space-time will just not be beholden to the speed limit and moving around. Do you think that that's a step too far, or do you think that maybe we might be able to go superluminal with matter using such a method?
I think it's fun speculation. I don't see that as anywhere near the future. It is true that given distance measures that if you were to, it is possible for something that goes away from the Earth to eventually be moving faster than the speed of light relative to Earth, because the speed of light is actually a local measurement. It is how fast something passes by you locally. So when we talk about something cosmological out in the universe, there can be distortions of space and time that create apparent superluminal motion in galaxies and things like that. And they can actually move outside of our light cone, so we don't see more recent light emitted by them. But things like, I don't really know how you pronounce his name, I see it, Abercrombie drive, is really interesting speculation because it's contracting space-time cosmologically in one direction and expanding it back in another. I'm betting we're not seeing that in the near future. I'm betting we're going to discover extraterrestrial life in the near future, but we're not seeing that anytime soon.
So, well, unless we discover extraterrestrial life using it. I would
and
imagine.
if you knew what signatures to look at, we'd have
Exactly.
to know what techno signature to see.
Well, you would think it would be a gigantic burst of gamma rays or something like that as they stopped, if they could stop.
Well, we see gigantic bursts of gamma rays as gamma ray bursts.
Do you think that that's on the table? Possibly. I mean, one must always look to nature first, but do you think
Right.
it could be aliens coming out of warp?
People have analyzed gamma ray bursts as possibilities of beacons or something from extraterrestrials, and no one's ever been able to show anything. I mean, again, it's this great speculation. It makes for good shows like this. There's no real evidence. These things apparently are supernovae or colliding neutron stars, and they don't seem to encode any information that we can find or have some kind of indicative techno signature that we could look for, or maybe we don't know how to decode it, but nothing we can see right now.
Now, it's been said that anytime one goes faster than light, FTL, once you build such a device, you have also built a time machine.
Oh, that's not actually true. That depends on where your observers are, whether you're going to come back to the same spot. It's actually quite complicated. There are versions where it is true. You can come up with experiments or specific sequences of events where that would be true.
Now, do you think time travel is at all possible, or is that just something that is absolutely prohibited by the universe? Backwards time travel. Forwards time travel, we obviously have, but backwards.
Right. So I'll reiterate what you said. It's easy to travel into the future. Watched Planet of the Apes, they did that. And it's not even controversial. So the twin paradox is like that. So you can travel into the future and it's not a problem. But the problem is, can you travel into the past? So some laws of physics, the macroscopic laws of physics, appear to be coming down. So it seems like individual particles, there's no rule against it, but entropy does seem to indicate that entropy increases in a system that's in a closed system that's not in communication with the outside. So entropy seems to be an arrow to the future. There are other possible arrows to the future. So, however, there are also in general relativity, there's possibilities of going in just using the equations of general relativity. You could possibly go into the past, going around cosmic springs or something like that. But we have no evidence of that, and that is outside of entropy. So if you include entropy, which appears to be an arrow of time, it looks like you're always pointed toward the future. But that doesn't mean that no one could think of some way of doing it necessarily. Modern physics can't give you a time machine right now, and can point out problems that you might have if you had a time machine. But that doesn't mean that in the future, these problems might be solved. Therefore, it might be of use to look to see if people from the future have ever been. Now, this is one of the most controversial things I've ever done, and I'm a physics professor, there are other people who I've embarrassed to think that I've looked at something like this. So it has an interesting root story. So I have my students over, undergraduates and graduate students, and they would come over in the summer and we would have a poker game, back when you could do things like that. I can't do it this summer. And so at this point, we have wide-ranging discussions about pretty much anything. And I encourage them to be creative. And so one of the discussions was, if something from the future was here, how would we know? And that, oddly enough, becomes a scientific question. How is it, what scientific steps could you go through to ask, okay, is this from the future? If you just say, well, it looks like the future, well, that's a scientific question. What about it? What about its looks? It seem like it's from the future. So we started thinking about what is it that you could do it. So one of the things we came up with is knowledge. There is knowledge that only becomes available that is not known beforehand. That if someone from the future were to come back, they could say, here's knowledge you don't have that they could verify it as true. And you could check and see, okay, was that true or is that true? So far, so what we did is we say, okay, how do we know this isn't happening? Well, no one's come up to me and said, oh, here's the future lottery numbers. There are scams like that where someone will pretend to tell you future lottery numbers, or like in the movies. What's the one with there's a famous movie where it's all show. So we came up with the idea of knowledge that we should not be known. And so, for instance, the date Michael Jackson's death.
Good job, Commander. No threats to the sector.
If someone in the 1980s kept broadcasting, I know that Michael Jackson will die on this day, and then he does, either they killed him or they arranged for it, or they knew something. So we came up with a couple interesting things. One is Comet ISON. There was an ISON. There was never a Comet ISON before 2 years ago. Never. So we started looking on the World Wide Web to see if anyone ever mentioned Comet ISON. Like, oh, I'm sorry, I'm in from the wrong time period. That comet hasn't been discovered yet. You know, we really didn't think there would be anything like that, because this was, we're just shooting the breeze. This is over a poker discussion. But it got kind of fun to do. So we found no mention of Comet ISON ever before it was declared to be a comet name. But afterwards, it was like this spike. It's all over the internet. It's on Facebook, it's on Twitter, it's everywhere. Comet ISON. Before that, nothing. Black, nothing. So an even more popular one was was mentioned by one of the students in the name of Pope Francis. All right. So this makes it even stranger because you get religion involved. There's never been a Pope Francis before the current Pope Francis. Never, ever, ever. So we decided to go looking on the internet to see if anyone ever mentioned a Pope Francis. We looked through Google. We Googled everything we could. We looked on Facebook, and there are problems with all of these. For instance, if you Google now Pope Francis before there was a Pope Francis, you'll find hits because there are advertisements on pages, modern advertisements on old pages. So that doesn't work. So if you go to Facebook and you see someone talking about Pope Francis before there was a Pope Francis, that doesn't work either because Facebook allows you to backdate Francis. Twitter does, as Twitter does not. So we decided to look on Twitter for any mention of a Pope Francis before there was Pope Francis. We went through years of Twitter and we could find nothing. And then, we found one thing, but somebody was a month before they speculated, so we don't really think that was knowledge before knowledge. It was but there was nothing. So based on that, we can say that this is the best search for future time travelers yet. It doesn't prove that there is no such thing as backward time travel. It's nowhere close to a physical proof. It's not even, pervasive evidence. But we searched over the widest databases we could, the greatest extent that we could, and we found nothing. So according to this, there is no evidence of travelers from the future visiting it.
And indeed, no evidence anywhere, because no one has ever come out and, credibly anyway, said, I am from the future and here's what's going to happen.
But people do that all the time, but they're just unbelievable. What people say is, and we analyze some of this. So if people say, if I go into the past, I'm going to remember the stock market and I'm going to make a lot of money. Right? So let's say, or with a lottery. Lottery's a big one. So let's say you were to approach a lottery winner and say, hey, lottery winner, you just won, what, $100 million. Are you from the future? First of all, they're not going to want to talk to you. Second of all, they're not going to, what? What are you talking about? Are you nuts? So that's not a good way. Trying to find lottery winners and ask them if they're from the future is not a good way. And we came up with a lot of bad ways of searching. But the best way we found was actually on Twitter to see if, when there's a sharp break of knowledge, if you look before that sharp break, and some that piece of knowledge is created, if you look before that to see if anyone's mentioned it. So far, we always find that.
Now, this gets into because causality is really. My question would be is that if a time traveler did go back and violated causality, would we even know about it, or would the universe just change seamlessly and account for the new, situation that we wouldn't know it, or is it something that we would have?
They're getting away, Commander. Stop them.
They assassinated some dictators like that. Would we know that, or would we just history just simply change?
Yeah, so we actually did a little more experiment that looked at that. So we coined things 2 times. There's X time, so there's only one timeline. And Star Trek does a lot of this, where something happens and then someone goes back and fixes it up, and that's the way it always was. So there's only one timeline. That's a fixed timeline. Or possibly there's a plastic timeline where things can change. And maybe things branch out into other branches of the multiverse or something like that. And so we thought of that as a plastic timeline. So we asked, I forget exactly how we structured this, but we had people send us email if they were able to an address that we only released later. So we look for email that has been time dated before a certain time. And then if it's a plastic timeline, they should tell us that. If it's a fixed timeline, then they might not be able to do that. So we've never received, I haven't checked some of these things. We never received an email to that address. But we actually had a hashtag. I think it was hashtag, I have a time traveler too. We wanted people to tweet to that hashtag before a certain date. We never found anything. You might ask how come there's a 2 on there, because we screwed it up the first time. And we found out that other people actually had that hashtag somewhere else. If you put a number after it,
Now, for me, the time travel usually tricks the universe in general relativity laws. You would need one idea that I've seen is build a gigantic cylinder in space, close to the universe, go along the universe or something like that, and rotate it, be able to sort of take advantage of it, go back in time that way, or at least in a sense. But we would see that if somebody did it. So, and you couldn't do it, you physically couldn't do it. Do you think any kind of time travel, even if it is allowed by physics, do you think that it's impossible to do?
I'm agnostic. I generally lean toward it's impossible. Then again, if I thought it was totally free and possible, I wouldn't be sitting there. So I'm generally a skeptic of it. People think of my crazy stuff I do, but I believe all these fantastical things. And generally, I'm pretty conservative. I generally don't think these things are possible. So I'm kind of curious if they are and why they're not. But I generally play the line and say, I don't think there's big cylinders. I don't think people are circling cosmic strings and coming back. If that does happen, I don't think it's possible to travel into space. But I'm not sure.
Now, there is one situation. A black hole, if you're really close to it. Is time travel possible there, or is it impossible because you would simply be spaghettified?
Well, if you scale up black holes, you can scale down this identification. I think you're talking about a rapidly rotating black hole.
Yes.
So I haven't studied it in great detail. I don't know if it's possible to actually do that and come back out. It's not a matter of being outside and being spaghettified, it's going inside of the horizon that you can't get back out of. So we don't know of any wormholes. It is, again, a solution to general relativity, but we don't know of any testable wormholes where things actually go in and come out. If you did that, actually, you might be able to go faster than light, because you go in one place from someplace else, instantly. There's no real, the equations have speculations that allow that kind of speculation, but there's no evidence. We've never really seen anything that tells us that you can build that. It's just fun to think, you take these equations and you extrapolate them, then there's these extrapolations, but we don't have the technology to really explore those extrapolations. Many times in technology, in physics, you come up with these things and there are parts of physics that we know isn't really physical. It's just, that's what the equations say, that our equations are invalid on that. It's quite possible that our equations just aren't valid in those areas. They seem to be, but we can't go there and really explore it.
Now, this has happened before, because one can sit there and send astronauts to the moon or whatever using Newtonian physics. But at some point, Newtonian physics stops predicting, therefore you get to relativity. Relativity now is level, so it seems to me that we got really good tools for precise as opposed to reality. Do you think we'll ever be able to pin these down into, for lack of a better term, perfectly valid theories or perfectly valid models?
I do believe that there is a better model beyond general relativity, quantum mechanics, that have aspects of both. However, that's a really good way to waste time. If you want to get lost in mathematics, if you want to just spend years of your life investigating symmetries and equations, try to combine gravity and quantum mechanics. Chances are, as the thousands of people who've been trying to do that over the past decades, will come up with some pretty interesting math and no prediction. What I prefer to do is to look and see where we're on the cutting edge and say, okay, what's just beyond the cutting edge? What is it we can do with today's technology? That's what I prefer to do. That's why I'm so happy about this. I think we're getting close to kind of the discovery of extraterrestrial life. Because I think that is within our technological boundaries. It can be, hundreds of years before humanity or the successor to humanity with the singularity that can emerge with silicon or computer devices that gets to a place where gravity and quantum mechanics can be merged to a point where
And the question has to be asked, is there unknown physics? Is there relationship between the missing puzzle piece between general relativity and mechanics? Is there some that sort of
we don't know.
well, but you gotta ask yourself.
It's certainly a lot of fun to we learn most from pushing the frontiers, just one step beyond, and asking, where is our technology? What is our technology allowing us to do that we couldn't do? Right now, we can look for ethicities of extraterrestrial civilizations better than we ever have been before. The technology is just better. It doesn't mean it's better. We can search for that. We can search for biosignatures better than we ever have before. That's a frontier that's exciting. And it is a very interesting thing. There are frontiers that we're not really need to reach. And they're fun to think about. And maybe there'll be a surprise discovery that allows us into those frontiers. We don't even know what those frontiers are. I don't know if those are.
Well, one interesting thing related to discovering life is this idea of being able to characterize it in some other atmospheres. And we can answer these questions like, can atmospheres life survive being so close to Earth? And find it.
Me too. And a lot of people, a lot of top scientists, not me. So, I mean, one of the NASA's chief scientists, Jim Green, believes that in the next 20 years, we're probably going to come across some kind of extraterrestrial life. And so there are NASA missions that are looking at that.
I do too, especially if it's going to Tucker, you're hosting a debate, which is an anniversary debate. The infamous debate that how big is the universe? Really shakily.
You did good.
And Fred Curtis was correct, and how big the apparent universe was. Give us some historical overview of that debate.
Well, it actually debated several things. One of them was where our sun was in our galaxy. Shapley thought that we were away from the center, but Curtis thought we were in the center. So the general simplification that Curtis just won because the little spiral nebulae they were seeing out there turned out to be external galaxies, independent island universes. That's true that Curtis won that point, and that is the point that is arguably the most important in history. But there were other points that went back and forth on that were actually split. So both Shapley and Curtis were quite good astronomers. They talked previously before this. So at the 1920 meeting in 1926, they were invited to give their points of view on several things, in particular about what these spiral nebulae were. Were they literally spiral clouds just in our own galaxy, in our universe, or were they other galaxies in our own world? And the community, the astronomy community, yes, they were all of them. It's kind of unusual that the younger up-and-comer guy, Herbert Shapley, was the one who's looking to educate that our galaxy is going nuts. The established journey person, Curtis, was saying that, oh no, these things are probably external galaxies. So we have a debate site that you go to, the link that you'll find on this show in the discussion. It's served from NASA. So on there you will see that we have Shapley's granddaughter talks about her memories of Mother Shapley. Curtis's great-great-granddaughter and great-grandson are both speaking about Curtis. So they are both very well aware of their heritage. This amazing debate that essentially decided, it didn't decide, it brought to the front where humanity is in this universe. What is our universe? And it was a scientific question. It was decided scientifically. How big is our universe? Where are we? That was 100 years ago.
Now, and you're hosting a new version of the debate with a different question. Tell us about that.
Well, I've been trying for 2 years to put together 100th anniversary debate. Before that, I put together the 75th anniversary debate in 1995. So that was an in-person event that was at the exact same auditorium as the 1920 debate. And the topic of that debate was the distance that the gamma ray burst. And the interesting thing about that was that gamma ray burst, there were two major schools. The astronomy community was split. Are gamma ray bursts in our own galaxy, sort of like the spiral nebulae were, or are gamma ray bursts far across the universe? And the community was pretty well split on one and the other. And so that was in 95, and that was actually solved a few years later, just sort of like the Shapley-Curtis debate was solved a few years later. So then there was actually a 6th and 7th debate, but then interest kind of waned, and we got tired of being the debate people. But I always knew the 100th anniversary was coming up. So for 2 years before this, I kept trying to put it together, and it kept falling apart. And I could go through it's actually humorous in the ways that it would fall apart. But what saved the debate, which was an online debate, this was not a live event. What happened in August on April 26th, exactly 100 years after the 1920 debate, was we unveiled a bunch of points of view. And we got the topic that I've always wanted the most. So we had similar topics before. Instead of the scale of the universe debate, we did life in the universe debate. So just like 100 years ago, people were debating, is our galaxy all that there is, or are there other galaxies out there? What is the scale of our universe? I think one of the biggest questions, arguably the biggest scientific question of our time is, are we alone in the universe? What is the first way that we will discover life off the Earth? And there's a lot of investment of time and resources and missions and possibilities in the and it's not just a one or another. So we have about 15 people or so, and they give a few minutes, a few slides, something that YouTube video, and they back any of a number of points of view. One could be that the first way that we can discover extraterrestrial life will be in our solar system. With Mars or the oceans and settlements. Another way could be with exoplanets out away from our solar system where there is some kind of unmistakable biosignature. Planet eclipsing a star and you see something in the atmosphere. So that's biosignatures are one reason thing. Another possibility is technosignature. So we have our summary talk was given by what's online, especially by Joe Carter. She was a lasting, wonderful person, scientist. And so she also believes, as several people in the mystical debate programs and technosignature, that we will know some technological, we will know origin of everything. There's many devices that are more or less micro. I don't think it does really say that you might find fish living in
Well, also highly reflective, nice and sunflowers as well.
Oh, yeah. Well, I think Carl Sagan was a fan of big balloon creatures in Jupiter and Saturn. But most thinking is micro. And you will find microbial life on Titan or on Mars or under some slightly under Mars, or in one of the underground seas in one of the moons in the solar system. So we have a lot of people who are actually building missions to go do that. They outline some of their logic. And that is on the website that you can find all the points of view, you can read the history of the chapter Curtis debate. You can see the summary Joe Carter, and it's all online for people to see wherever they want to see.
There will be links to this description. Now, what about another scenario where we don't see biosignatures and we don't see technosignatures, but instead the biologists are able to create an organism in a laboratory, and they crack the nut of abiogenesis, and it turns out to be easy. One could then infer that life's everywhere without actually seeing it, right?
Yes, that would be absolutely fascinating, but that would not be off the Earth. So the idea is, how do we discover extraterrestrial life? That's sort of the focus of the debate is that. So what you're saying is really, really interesting. And I don't know enough biology to know how easy it is. I don't know if anybody does, but I'm not a biologist, so I really don't. But that is a certainly fascinating line of inquiry, and I would be very interested in reading about what's going on with that and how close people are.
And I wonder, because that actually represents me. My view, and it has more validity than anyone else's, but my view is that the universe is probably teeming with microbes. I don't know about intelligent life, I'm sure it happens, but I'll bet there are microbes everywhere. But so, in my view is that by asking the are we alone question, by rephrasing it as is life on Earth alone, we have two ways to figure that out within my lifetime. One is we drill into Europa and find something, or Mars, or upper atmosphere, Venus, or something like that. Or the biologists are able to tell us abiogenesis is really easy, really hard. But within that's an interesting point that just about the moment that Earth could support life appears. So maybe that suggests that it's easy.
Right. I also believe that there are microbes everywhere, and that it's relatively easy.
I think all the indicators are there for it. And to me,
we live in the age where this would be decided. Just
Yes.
like living in 1920, people lived in the age where the size of the universe was known, was decided. And there's only one time that happens. We probably live in the age where we're going to find out whether we're alone and how common life is. And I just think that that's wrong.
And one could say, for just to understand the depth of that, this is the greatest question in human history. And the discovery of even independent life for Earth, that the solar system may have produced it in several places, is probably the most important discovery ever in human history. Wouldn't you agree?
Yes. Yes, it's just, it places us biologically in the universe. Before 1920, we were placed physically in the universe. Biologically, we don't yet really know. We're getting close to knowing. And so finding that out exactly what it is, there might be some twists and turns, is just amazing. And it just places us as we've never been placed before. So I have a feeling, just like if you go back in human history, humanity always considered itself to be the center of everything. It's like the Copernican principle. But here I think we're going to find out that humans and life on Earth is not that special, that it's not that hard, that there's actually life in lots of places. And so just like we learned that we're not in the center of the universe, and the universe isn't centered on the Earth or the sun or the solar system or our galaxy, I think we're going to learn that humanity is not where life, the only thing that's sentient, life is very common outside of Earth. I think we're going to go through a series of discoveries of how the great extent of life is.
Now, if you had to make a bet regarding the solar system and microbes off Earth, independent life, where do you think the best chances for finding it?
I would say under the surface of Mars. We have some experience with Mars. We've sort of, back in the Viking days, they thought they discovered life on Mars. And that wasn't the only time they thought they discovered life on Mars. But because of all the failures, we're getting to know better how to look for life on Mars. Specifically, not everywhere, for sure, but Mars specifically. And we're getting more and more specialized missions that are going there even this year. And so I think that with all that focus on Mars and the ability to monitor Mars for some of these things, like what's going on with the methane, what's creating the methane, and digging under the surface, all the orbiters and rovers, I think that in the next few years we're going to come, my guess is microbes, we're going to discover microbes first under the surface of Mars, then we'll find out maybe that Mars is essentially a desert that has very small amounts of life on the surface, whereas Earth is essentially an oasis with small areas of desert. I think Mars is sort of like the opposite of that, but it's almost all desert. It's hard to find life on the surface, but if you know where to look under the surface, and maybe slightly places on the surface, you can find it.
Now, that would be something like, a liquid water aquifer or something like that beneath the surface of Mars, and every so often maybe that water varies and you get a bloom of activity underneath the surface, which is perhaps responsible for the methane blooms that appear to occur there, right?
It could be. That's one way. I don't really know enough about the biology to go into it very deeply. You probably know the biology better than me. I've sort of been an observer for these things, and so I listen to the stories. I don't know the deep biology, but yeah, that sounds reasonable what you're saying. But we do know there is frozen water on Mars. Liquid, I mean, not just frozen carbon dioxide, but actually frozen water under the surface of Mars. That's a starting point. You can get places where it's liquid.
It's interesting because if you go back, a number of years, we really only had a few candidates that we knew about, which were Mars and Europa, I believe, was known about in the 1970s, that there may have been liquid water underneath a shell of ice, but now we have a whole bunch of ice shell moons that appear, and including things like Ganymede, even where we seem to have this. And then on top of that, we start looking at places like Venus. Like, well, that once may have been rather Earth-like with liquid water, and maybe that life migrated into the upper atmosphere where it's a little bit, considerably more clement than the surface. In fact, it's probably the most Earth-like environment, the upper atmosphere. It's probably the most Earth-like environment in the solar system. And we just had this blossoming of thought on just where you could have microbial life in the solar system, which to me says, good bet we're going to find it. And we're going to probably find it soon. We just have to build the instruments to do it. So what do we have coming up that could answer these questions about Mars, but also the other ones?
Well, I don't know all the missions. I don't necessarily speak for NASA, but I do know we're going to have a helicopter on Mars pretty soon, and we're going to have a helicopter on Titan in a few years. And they're going to be able to move around more than we've ever seen before and respond to things that are seen on the surface and possibly go more than a rover like Curiosity, go further and explore places that might have that. So yeah, there are several missions going to Mars, not just from the U.S. in the next few years. I don't have a list of them. And we live in a golden age of solar system exploration and of universe exploration with the deep telescopes. We're not going out to the outer universe, but we're seeing out to the outer universe. You know, with Hubble and with Kepler and TESS and soon with JWST. So we're seeing that. But in our solar system, we're exploring. We've had satellites, spacecraft around every planet and used to be planet, or passing by out there. And so we've just discovered so much in the past 30 years, 50 years about our solar system. And we're just keep going. And I think we're learning how to learning how to look for life. And I'm excited about these helicopters to see how they're going to go around.
Yes, the Titan copter is probably the most exciting robotic NASA probe I have ever seen, and I've seen them all the way since Voyager. Just this idea of a like an octocopter, I think. It's got, I think, 8 blades flying around Titan, and I wonder, I'm like, what will the images look like? You know, I mean, what will we see? You know, things like flying over the Grand Canyon. I can't wait. That's a great one. That one actually even excites me more than the James Webb Telescope.
Yeah, it'll be really cool. I really hope everything goes like it's supposed to with that one and with other ones. And if that one doesn't go, then we'll probably send another one. So I like the idea of exploring by helicopter now. We're entering the helicopter age. And that's really cool because that gives us a capability we didn't have before.
A very big capability. Now, you are also known for co-creating something that's I've enjoyed for decades, the astronomy picture of the day. How did that start?
Okay, yeah, thanks for asking. So it's apod.nasa.gov. That's short enough that you don't have to go look under the video for it. So it started 25 years ago. So I worked at NASA Goddard Space Flight Center. I had an office mate, Jerry Bunnell, and we were friends and we would talk about the craziest stuff. And this new thing was coming in called Mosaic, and I didn't know what Mosaic was. And so it had to be loaded on my computer. I had to download it onto my computer by FTP, I think. And then I saw that you could go to certain places where people could put up information about things that they like. So one of the first places I went to was the MST3K site, Mystery Science Theater 3000. And that was cool. But then we started realizing that this is a whole new way of communication. And so Jerry and I would talk about, where is this going? And so we had the idea, at the same time, we were getting emails. Most communication, much communication outside of people who live right around you, work right around you, was through email. So we would get emails with images attached, particularly from Hubble. But sometimes we'd get images attached, and the description was written by the person who sent the email, and it was like not only wrong, but it was like silly. And it was sometimes spreading disinformation, which is such a big topic for disinformation. And it was like, no, that's not what that is. And so we sort of decided that maybe we should start posting these images on a website like MST3K does, and just have a really short description of what it really is, not the crazy stuff that some of the stuff we're seeing. And so we discussed that at lunch, and then a few lunches later, it still seemed like a good idea. So another coincidence is that NASA Goddard Space Flight Center had a really thick pipe back then, which was unheard of. Back then, basically, you took your phone, you either dialed or you punched in your numbers and you put the speaker of your phone and go doo doo doo, and you plug it in there. But that's not the way NASA Goddard worked. NASA Goddard worked pretty much like we see it today. They had a really thick pipe. They had bandwidth that was almost impossible to saturate. I think it was called a T1 line, several of them. So we could put up websites. So we decided that we had several ideas that this is the idea that took off. So we asked the higher ups at NASA if it was okay that we did this, and they said, well, the web is really for scientists. So we don't really want to become involved. So you go off and you do that if you want. And so we said, okay. So back in 1995, June, so 25 years ago, earlier this month, we posted our first one, and then a couple days went by, and then we started every day. We had some interesting discussions, like people, we weren't well known at all. We had 14 page views on our first day, but some of our friends around the lab would come up and they'd say, aren't you going to run out of images? So we thought about that, and the Ranger series on the moon took hundreds of thousands of pictures of the lunar surface. Hundreds of thousands. So we could run a different picture of a crater pretty much every day and not run out of images. So the question in our mind is really, would we come up with enough interesting images? Not could we come up with enough different images? So to our surprise, it actually was pretty easy. A lot of the major observatories are coming out with stuff. NASA had stuff, Hubble had stuff, and after even a month or two, people would send us stuff sometimes, but we know which major sites to go to. So we actually didn't have a problem finding good material, and we realized that there were some really classic images out there that hadn't been described in a public setting. Only if you got an email from them or if you happened to know about them. So we started making sure we covered all the major images. So that's sort of what we do now. If there was an astronomy picture that best summed up today, what is it? Then here it is, and here's a description of that. And it's usually 150 words or so, and we hyperlink best links, and we try to write it on a wide range of levels, all the way from kids in middle school can get something out of it to professional scientists, can follow some of the links and say, oh, I didn't know that. So we've been going 25 years. We have well over 5,000 images now, and we're just in a daily routine, punching these out. And so usually it's a lot of fun.
Do you have, over the course of doing this, do you have a favorite image from Hubble or something like that? And I can tell you what mine is the Pillars of Creation, the amazing image that Hubble took years ago. Is there something that within the whole of astrophotography?
Hubble Ultra Deep Field, is that right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
HUDF? Yeah, that's a really good one. Yeah, I have some of my favorites. It changes over time. So if you ask me next year, I'll have forgotten what I said this year and say, oh no, it's this one. So there's one taken by Hubble called UGC, which is the Galaxy Catalog 1810. So it's it's called UGC 1810 Wildly Interacting Galaxy from Hubble. And it's got this starburst ring, and it just seems it's dynamic because it looks like things are happening. It's galaxy sized. It's got the old center and the new starburst ring. It's got other galaxies around the edge, and it just seems very, very interesting to me. And so our lead on that is what's happening to this spiral galaxy, because it looks like a spiral galaxy a little bit, but then it doesn't really look like a spiral galaxy once you start looking at it. And that's kind of the most popular type images that we have. The images that kind of look familiar, but then they kind of don't look familiar. And so the question is raised in the viewer's mind, what's going on? So that's the hook. Then they want to read the caption, then maybe they learn something about science and about that image. So another image that is one of my favorite, there it is, Aurora over Norway. So this one actually has a story behind it. So